Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's session. My name is Reese, and I'll be your moderator for today's session and your host, actually, because Richie's not here. That being said, welcome to the session. We're going to get underway in a couple of minutes. We're just waiting so everyone has a chance to join before we get going. If you haven't done so already, please do register for the session using the QR code that's on screen now. You can also head over to datacamp.com/webinars, where you'll find this session as well as all of our future sessions as well. If you would like to prompt along with us for today's session, we have a DataCamp Data Lab notebook that you can work alongside us with. You do not need a paid DataCamp account to code along with us today. Everything can be done on a free account. So if you're on YouTube, we'd recommend watching on YouTube. Check out the pinned comment where you can create a duplicate of the notebook that we're going to be running through today. Also on YouTube, in the video description, we have a link to the resources that we're going to be using today. So that will have a link to the slides, the notebook, as well as relevant sessions and everything else SQL AI related that we've got for you. So please do check out the resources document linked in the video description. And yeah, if you'd like to code along with us, please do so using a free DataCamp account, and you can do so by clicking the link that is pinned in the YouTube chat. This is also the first event that we have going on in our SQL Rookie to Rockstar campaign. I will put the QR code up for that on screen now. So yeah, we've got a session today, we've got a session tomorrow, and then we've got a session on Thursday, which will all turn you from a SQL Rookie to a SQL Rockstar. Brilliant. I will just repeat the housekeeping once more for anyone that's just joined. Hello, if you've just joined, my name is Reese, and I'll be your moderator and host for today. We are just about to get started. We're just waiting for everyone to get settled before we get going. If you haven't done so already, please do register for this session. The QR code to do so is on screen now. There's also a link to do so in the video description. If you'd like to prompt along with us today, you can do so for free. All you need is a DataCamp account. You do not need a premium account, and you can create a copy of the Data Lab notebook that we're going to be working in today. You can find a link to that in the video description, as well as pinned to the top of the chat in YouTube. If you have any questions at any point throughout the session, let us know in the chat. We're going to be answering your questions for the final 10 minutes of the session, so please do stick around for that. And with that, I think we're about ready to get started. So let me pause the music and I will appear. Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to today's Code Along. My name is Reese, and yeah, as previously mentioned, I'll be your host for today's session. Obviously, no Richie today. Richie is unfortunately enjoying some nice time off, but he will be back soon. He'll be back next week. But yeah, for the moment, I'm here. So yeah, welcome Data Scamps and Data Champs. This is part one of a two-part code along that we're running on AI-assisted SQL. And this is also part one of the SQL Rookie to Rockstar series. So make sure you signed up for the whole series. There is a link to do so in the resources document in the description. Now, SQL is the most widespread data programming language. If you ever work with data in a database, then understanding it is incredibly helpful. That's true even if you don't have data in your job title, since pretty much every white-collar job is going to require you to access a database at some point. The big change in the last few years or so is that generative AI can now reliably generate high-quality SQL. That completely changes your approach to working with it and to learning it as well. Rather than typing SQL code directly, you'll spend more time writing prompts to generate SQL code. And being able to read and understand SQL is needed more than writing it. So today we're going to get started with AI-assisted SQL. Today's guest is John Brazier-Beckett, a marketing analytics manager here at DataCamp. So yeah, welcome, John.
Thank you very much, Reese, and thank you for having me.
No worries at all. So John makes sure that all of DataCamp has visibility into how well our marketing campaigns work. He has a decade of experience in analytics and in the education and in insurance industries. So yeah, with that, over to you, John.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for coming along to this webinar. So as Reese said, SQL is far and away the most popular way for people to access and transform data, and using it is a big part of not just data jobs these days. Many of my marketing colleagues who aren't, whose job titles don't include the word data or analyst, still have to access data and still find it beneficial to them to be able to basically ask their own questions to data, and therefore it's very helpful if they're able to write SQL. Since a lot of them aren't analysts and don't necessarily have the depth of experience of SQL coding, pretty much every day I have colleagues writing SQL with AI and then asking people like me to check their work or showing me results they've come out with from investigation that they've done themselves. And it's amazing, and it's massively changed the way that our team operates, because it no longer has to be just me being the one writing the SQL. And actually lots of people who wouldn't traditionally have gone out to learn SQL to make their day-to-day easier are finding it easy to adapt their workflow by using SQL with AI. So just to talk about what we're going over today. Our data set is animal rescue incidents from the London Fire Brigade. This is a data set that's one of many open data sets provided by the London Fire Brigade. And the goal here is for people to write SQL for the first time using AI. We're very much assuming that there is absolutely nothing, that you have no experience before using SQL. Although there is also a secondary goal here of understanding the feedback loop that you should be trying to get into, where you're working with an AI and trying to make sure that it's doing the best coding and you're creating the best results you can. And why are we doing this? Well, AI can empower people to learn and use complex SQL. I mean, to be much, much more complex than they would have done before, and to learn very quickly, but also to get results very quickly and to write lots of code very quickly. So it's just the new way that things happen. To be honest, you shouldn't have any trouble accessing the data because it's all just built into the notebook, but hopefully you've all got access to that. If you don't, please put it in the chat. And just before we start, a brief word about the AI workflow. This is what we'll be kind of talking about all of today. And this is the kind of sequence of steps that you should be going through anytime that you're trying to create SQL with AI. Step one is always think about what you want to achieve, what data you have, potentially look at the data set or the schema. Step two is then write out what you want to happen in natural language as a prompt to the AI. And then step three is, well, it's giving you code from that prompt. So you want to try and understand it and think, does that make sense? That's the slightly scary part, if I'm honest, because telling people you're responsible for the code you submit sometimes makes people think, well, I thought the idea was that the AI was supposed to understand what's going on, and it is, but also as a human, we're responsible for what we do. And part of the idea here is that we're not just offloading all responsibility onto the AI. We need to understand what it's doing, and that means that we can check its code for errors or hallucinations. And something I'll be focusing on a lot is what you should be looking at, what you should be checking, where the AI is most likely to make mistakes, small mistakes that is, and or where what terminology you should be using to achieve the effect you want. And then you should run the code, verify the results, and then iterate. Do you go back and ask another question? Do you ask the same question again a different way? That kind of thing. So let's jump into the workbook. Everybody should have a copy of this workbook, hopefully. It'll be in the notes of the webinar. And just to draw your attention to a few things before we start. Up here in the right, you've got this files panel, and this includes the data set that we've got, animal rescue incidents.csv. If you wanted, you could download this and as a CSV, you could upload it to ChatGPT and ask it to write SQL for you. You don't have to do this in DataLab, although obviously I think that DataLab is the best way to do this. There's also the solutions written in another workbook in here, although obviously I prefer that you code along with the webinar, but it's there if you need it. So yeah, today we're going to be examining data covering the London Fire Brigade's animal rescue efforts. I've got a description of what the data looks like here, but actually we don't really need to look at that yet because we should probably start by saying, well, what is SQL? Ultimately, SQL is a programming language. It's an acronym that stands for Structured Query Language, also called SQL. Some people feel very strongly about whether you call it SQL or SQL, but it's used to fetch and transform data. And what you can see here is a SQL cell. So this is just a little scrap of SQL code, and the idea here is that we can execute this on demand in DataLab. So if you move your mouse to the right-hand side of the cell, you can run it by pressing run, and that will hopefully run a piece of SQL code for you, which will execute it against the animal rescue instance CSV data, and it should, hopefully, give you an answer. And now I'm worried that something is going wrong with DataLab, which sometimes happens when you have quite a lot of people using it at the same time, because it's not saying there's an error. Let's give that a moment. So ultimately, as I said, SQL is used for querying data sets, which means that the input and the output are always going to be data sets, and they will have a very specific structure. They'll always have columns and rows. In fact, wait a sec. I think it's just decided that it's changing my access. I'm just going to try reloading this. Please excuse me for one moment.
John, just while we're waiting for the notebook to load, would you be able to change your audio input to maybe a different one, like the MacBook mic? Just picking up a little bit of background noise.
Yeah. Is that better? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, that's clear.
Okay. Hopefully this hasn't been, DataLab hasn't been crashed by thousands of us all trying to use it at once. One thing I can show you while that's loading is hopefully we can get a quick look at the underlying data. Or possibly that's going to slow down DataLab just too much. Let's say this is not the usual behavior. I think it's just because there are quite a few of us trying to use it all at once.
Okay, I'm just going to pop in while we wait for DataLab. It seems that maybe this was a little bit too popular for DataLab today. So well done everyone for turning up, but also maybe we've caused each other a few issues here. So John, I've got a couple of questions I was going to ask you at the end of the session. Maybe I can ask you these now while we hopefully wait for DataLab to settle itself.
Yeah, absolutely, please.
Cool. So obviously you use in your day job, you use SQL all the time. When are you writing it by hand, and when are you using AI to write it?
That's a good question. I would say it really depends on what I'm trying to achieve, and also there isn't really one way to use AI to write it. For example, a lot of the SQL that I use is about trying to improve our data pipeline, and that will all be written as sort of code in an IDE like Visual Studio Code, and in that I'll have GitHub Copilot that's very helpful for mostly making the kind of more boring elements of SQL just if you have to do something 50 times, or if you it's just very good at suggesting the next thing that you're going to write, basically. So that's just useful for kind of enhancing, but it's not necessarily doing all of the writing, it's just making it quicker. And then the other side is if you're trying to just kind of from scratch start with the data set and just get a quick summary, AI can be very good at that. If you can say things like what fields are in this workbook, or just get me a couple of rows of this data, It can be very helpful for that. To be honest, though, I think the number one thing that I use AI for is actually when I have to depart from SQL. And that's because I've been doing SQL for many years, but DataLab also has things like R and Python capabilities, and those can help you do things like draw graphs or implement complex R functions. And I'm not so familiar with those, so I mostly use AI to help me when I'm stepping outside of SQL to do things like implement a sort of a ggplot graph or something like that, which isn't obviously coding a SQL with AI, but it is using the AI to do the thing that I'm less familiar with, because it's a lot better at that than I am.
Follow-up question that I've had was, a lot of this comes down to like syntax and concepts. So if AI is doing the syntax for you, then it seems knowing SQL concepts becomes more important in terms of like when you're learning. So are there any concepts that you think everyone should know about when they're starting?
That's a good question. Understanding the sort of what the AI is doing does sort of involve, I mean, yes, in theory, it means that you should be able to write that SQL yourself. But in practice, I mean, for one thing, AI is very good at explaining what it's doing. And I realize that I'm saying, that you should be allowing the snake to eat its own tail there. But really, I think a lot of, I think the main thing that you should understand is actually what's possible, rather than necessarily exactly how to do it. And in that sense, I think writing SQL with AI is much the same as, or is very akin to writing SQL 5 or 10 years ago, when you would also just Google what you were trying to achieve and find other people's, I think the idea that vibe coding is this new thing is actually quite funny when you consider that for a very long time, people have been copying code segments off the internet and running them wholesale. So I think really a big part of it is understanding what is SQL doing and what's possible. And really, the way SQL works is that it's about getting data from one place to another place. And that means that it's going to be grabbing data and it's going to be outputting data. And so the kind of primary concept at play is really just, how do I describe this? It's that, well, SQL is a pipe. It's about getting something from A to B. And that means that while you are describing the changes that should be made, you have to understand the structure of the underlying data that it's in and what situation you're trying to get it to. And beyond that, you have to know what else SQL is capable of doing, what summarization it's capable of doing, that kind of thing. I mean, there are many things that SQL is not brilliant at, but a good analyst can pretty much get anything, if you can describe it in terms of plain English, it can probably be done in terms of SQL. But SQL is better at some things than others. And so I think the sort of concept that what SQL is particularly good at is saying, grab exactly this data, but then on top of that, you can do things like aggregation and summarization and so on. So I feel like I've just talked around quite a lot in circles quite a bit there. The number one thing to understand really is, what is SQL capable of? And that is mostly moving data around and summarizing it, really. That's everything it's really good at. And then within that, you need to figure out, well, how do I turn my problem into a moving data around and summarizing a problem? Do I need to add these things, divide them? So.
Got it. I think that's probably quite a good segue into mentioning the cheat sheets that we have available for SQL. We have quite a lot of SQL cheat sheets. I'll put a link in the chat very shortly, and we can you can have a look at those. We've also just created a new one recently based on the AI native intro to SQL with AI course. So that's definitely relevant for today. So I'll put a link to that in the chat. But looks like we're back online with DataLab. So maybe I'll hand it back over to you, John.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry for the delay, but we appear to have finally run the cell. It only took us 15 minutes. And you can see here that what we've got is an output that is itself a data frame. So we've got, this is a summary of some information. I wouldn't worry too much about what we've actually done here. The main thing is that we've executed SQL code, and by pressing run, and DataLab has taken that SQL, run it against the data set, which is animal rescue instance.csv, and it's given us this table as an output. So every SQL query will have an input table or tables and an output table. And in this output table, you can see that we've got columns. Columns are sometimes called fields. So you might say animal type is a field, and incident count is a field. And then it's also got rows. Rows are sometimes called observations or just rows, but Data Lab has conveniently numbered them for us, so you can look at row 4 and so on. But the idea usually is that you would expect a SQL table to have a couple of columns and then a ton of rows. And so usually with a kind of production database, you might have millions and millions of rows of data and maybe 12 columns on it. So yeah, that was our first go at running a little bit of SQL. But now we're going to try and get the AI to run some SQL for us. Now, generative AI is very, very good at converting natural language, i.e. how you and I would speak English, into a SQL statement. You can also write SQL yourself. And if you feel like doing that, I'm not going to stop you. But the thing is, AI is very powerful. And together with an AI, you can write some very complicated things much more quickly than you could on your own. The first step of any SQL query, whether you're using AI or not, is to look at the data that we have available. Our table is called animalrescueincidents.csv. So our first task is to ask the AI to reveal some rows of this table, i.e. just some of this data. And the way we're going to do that, if we click into this cell, on the right-hand side, you can see that there's an AI button here. And that allows us to send a prompt to the AI. You don't have to do it this way. As I said before, you could ask ChatGPT how to do things, that kind of thing. Or there are plenty of other tools that combine AI and SQL, but I personally think the data lab is great. So let's have a go. I mean, if we're really, the idea here is that we're just going to write some natural language. So we're going to start by saying something like, show me the data. And that's almost certainly not going to work. So the AI has gone, oh, right, let's write some SQL. This person has asked for the data. How deeply unhelpful is that? Well, that's not going to give us the answer we want because we haven't given the AI the context clues that it needs to execute or to write the query that we want to execute. So what we need to do is start by thinking about the data we have. Well, the data we have is animalrescueincidents.csv. So we want to, what do we want? Well, we want to look at this. So we can say, show me animalrescueincidents.csv. Let's try that instead. In fact, I'm just going to reject that previous query so that it doesn't think that I'm trying to modify it. And it's suggested select star from animalrescueincidents.csv. Let's try this. So this is just going to say get the data from that table. It has admittedly quite a big query in that we've just asked it to pull 13,000 rows worth of data, which is big in some data sets, small in others. But there we go. This is what our table looks like. Our underlying data has these columns here. We've got incidents for the London Fire Brigade from 2009 apparently, and they say the animal type and the location type and the area. There's a description which seems to be redacted for all the 2009 ones. I don't know if that's. I know that's a bit more detailed when you get to some of the later data. But there we go. And then some information about units deployed and how much it costs and that sort of thing. This is all real data, by the way, from the London Fire Brigade. That's quite a lot of data. The next step is to say, right, well, let's iterate on this. Why don't we try and reduce how much it's showing me at once? When you're trying to look at a data set for the first time, you usually just want to pull a couple of the rows. So I'm going to ask it to show me some of this data. And now when I run that, it's just going to pull in 5 rows because it added this limit 5. So yeah, I mean, what's it done? Let's have a talk through what the AI has decided to use here. So it's used select and from. Select is the first word of basically every SQL statement, unless you have a very different job to me anyway. It's an instruction to fetch data. So you're pretty much saying, go get that data. And that always starts with the word select. It's followed in this case by a list of the data we want, but actually it's a star because we want everything. Star just means get everything, as in terms of columns, that is, or fields. And then we've used the from statement to describe where we're getting the data from, the target data set or the source table. And in this case, it's animalrescueincidents.csv. So select everything from animal rescue incidents.csv. And then it's also added this limit 5 at the end, which is how it limited us to only 5 results, which is relatively self-explanatory. A few other things to quickly mention. I've put some other details about things that it might or might not add, but the main thing here is if you were to try and run animal rescue incidents, you're probably going to find that that's not going to work. I have found that the AI can sometimes take your prompt to make assumptions about it, like that this table exists. And I have found that if you put animal rescue incidents.csv in quotes, it's sometimes a bit better at understanding that that's exactly the term that you want to use. Sometimes you have to play around with it a bit. Also, sometimes you just edit it manually. Sometimes you just edit your query manually when you go, right, I know that I'm this close to what I need, and you just need to get the name of the table right. You'll find that when you're writing SQL with AI, there's a big difference as to whether or not the AI understands the schema, i.e. the sort of layout of the database that you're working with. We've got some information about the layout here. This is a list of all the columns that are in that data, which you can have a look at and will be very helpful if you're querying this. But the AI doesn't necessarily have that information. And if it doesn't, you have to be very careful about making sure that it's naming the table and the fields correctly at every stage. So moving on, we didn't actually check if this worked. Oh yeah, I just needed to change this back to a .csv because I broke it. That's why. There we go. Now, we don't always want to get every field from the data. So previously we put in we asked the AI to limit the amount of rows it was giving us, use the limit, but now we're going to ask just for a couple of fields. So why not ask for just the animal type and date time fields? So again, I'm going to go in here, we're going to say, get me the animal type and date time fields from animal rescue incidents.csv. Actually going to copy and paste that from here just to make sure that I've got it spelled exactly right. I'm going to put it in quotes just to make sure. I'm going to try running this. So it suggested animal type and date time. Now, interestingly, it spotted that there should be an underscore between animal and type, which is very clever. I'd actually hoped that it wasn't going to spot that and was going to get it wrong so that I could correct it. But this looks correct to me. So it's listed the fields that we want. It said where we're getting it from, but we don't yet have a limit at the end. So let's just ask it to only do 10 rows. Let's now put a limit of 10 in there. It's also put things in quotes. That's an interesting choice. Let's see if it works. SQL could be a bit weird about putting the names of things in quotes. See, yeah, what it's done here is it's tried to call it animal type with a space in it. That's not working. So let's go back here and let's do animal type like this. And that's cleaned it up. There we go. So now we should be able to run this because this animal type bit and this date time match the way that it's written up here. And so now we've got just 2 fields, just 10 pieces of data. And you see how we're using natural language to describe what we want, and ultimately the AI is translating that into SQL, but we also have to check that SQL. And I know that it's difficult to check the SQL when we don't necessarily know, what we're doing ourselves. But one of the things we can do is potentially ask it for help with checking that. So we'll try that next time we have something that goes wrong. One thing also to spot here is that these fields are separated with commas. That's the kind of mistake that humans will often make, is not putting a comma between fields. Although actually AI is really good at not doing that kind of thing because it's very good at syntax. It doesn't matter if the AI has arranged the fields in a different order. It may also have put them out like this or something. It could have formatted it differently. That's all fine. The spacing and that sort of thing doesn't really matter when it comes to SQL. It's just there to make it easier for humans to read. This should execute the exact same way. Cool. And just a quick troubleshooting tip. If this hasn't worked, just make sure that the field names are exactly the same as they were in the data above. That's pretty much the #1 thing that I do every day when writing SQL, is go back to the table that I'm reading from and check that I've spelled the field name the same way. Cool. Okay, so next up, we're on to filtering data. So although we know what the data looks like, we may not want to look at all of the data at once. And the restrictions we've been doing previously are saying, just get us all of certain columns or just get us all of certain rows. But actually, we've been somewhat randomly choosing which data we're looking at. We want to be able to look at a subset of the data. So next step is to ask the AI to show us incidents that were about cats. Now we know what this data looks like. Let's go back to this. We're looking at animal rescue incidents.csv. So we can see that the field that contains cats or is likely to contain information about whether or not it's a cat is the animal type field. But let's give it a go and ask the AI, show me incidents with cats in animal rescue incidents.csv. Now, we know that it should have used the animal type field, and it's figured that out. That's actually very clever. Do you see it's spotted that animal type equals cat is the correct way to do it. It's worried here about the casing. That's actually very sensible of it. So what it's doing here is saying, oh, just make animal type lowercase, just in case any of the cats have been spelt with an uppercase C. That's perfectly sensible. Yeah, that's actually, I'm quite pleased that it did that. The AI got it exactly right. Cool. So let's try running this. But it didn't work. And why didn't it work? I hadn't spotted. It's because we missed the .csv here. So actually, let's correct this. In fact, let's start by saying, how do we fix this? Now, this is where the SQL is going to do its best to try and figure out how to, it doesn't know. It doesn't have enough context to realize what's going on. So it said, oh, the problem must be because the field name is wrong, but it hasn't fixed it the correct way. The correct fix is just to put .csv in here. But if we're trying to do it without editing the code ourselves, I find it's easiest if you wipe the box again to start from scratch. That way you sort of don't have to worry about how to write a query that's about modifying what you've currently got, which is a very different skill. So let's try this. And that's worked this time. So you can see there's this feedback loop where we look at it and say, has it done the right thing? Great, it has. We run it, and then we go, oh no, there's a problem. And so we iterate and we improve as we go along. But it's both of us working on it at the same time. And you can see that we've got cats here, many of them. And in fact, if we look down here, we can see that there are 6,884 rows, which if you compare it to our original data set of, actually, we've limited it here, but there were about, I think, 13,000 rows in the whole data set. So yeah, more than half of them are cats. Apparently, the Fire Brigade rescue a lot of cats in London, at least relative to other animals. Now, in terms of what the AI used, it brought in a where clause. So where is used alongside true-false statements to filter the data to cases where that statement is true, which is a really, really roundabout way of saying that where is an instruction to say, just get me a subset of the data. So in this set of outfits, you can say where color equals green, and you're just going to get that one green outfit in the middle. And up here, yeah, we had where lower animal type equals cat. And I made a point about troubleshooting, checking casing, but the AI actually beat me. So good. Next step, well, let's look at the incidents that weren't about cats. Well, I'm going to cheat here. I'm going to grab the exact terminology that I used here, ask the AI to do the exact same thing. Incidents with cats. I'm going to say incidents in where the animal type was not cat. Let's try this. That looks pretty good. The code's very similar to what we saw above, except that this little thing here means not equal. And I can also say, explain this code to me. This is a little bit messy because it's obviously trying to overlay the code with the explanation. But if I accept it, I can read this and then I can undo in a second with Command Z, and it'll just go back to the code. So it's saying, select all columns from the CSV file, filters the results to only include the results where the animal type is not equal to cat, i.e. all animal rescue incidents except those involving cats. Sounds good to me. So I just pressed undo in order to get back to here. Let's run this. There we go. So this is all of the non-cats, and you can see there's a lot of diversity in these. We've got dogs, foxes, horses, rabbits, heavy livestock animals, whatever that refers to, all sorts of things, birds. But 5,900 rows here. Now there were 13,000 total. 6,900 where the animal type is cat, so just under 7,000, just under 6,000 where the animal type is not equal to cat. So not everything in this data is a cat or not a cat. Which sounds an awful lot like a physics problem, but what's actually happening here is that there are some cases where we don't know the animal type, and that's represented in a way that SQL understands. So let's explain this code to me. I'm just going to try and, I always like to copy and paste something I've done previously. It makes my life easier in terms of making sure I'm using good terminology. So I'm going to say, show me incidents. We're going to ask for incidents where we don't know the animal type. So I'm going to say, show me incidents in this where the animal type is unknown. I'm going to try running this, or rather I'm going to try asking the AI to give me some stuff. Now, what it's done here is it said, great, so let's look for cases where the animal type equals unknown. But that's not going to work because unknown is not cat. And I know that we've just agreed that there are things that are neither cats nor not cats. But this is not one of those things. So what we actually need to do is to say where something like we don't know the animal type. And that's because we're trying to prompt the AI rather than looking for a specific thing to look for is null. This is it. This is it. Just ignore the or animal type equals. Don't worry about that. So this is the null value. Null is a very special thing within SQL because it basically means I don't know. And that has its advantages and disadvantages. The disadvantage is that it can really trip you up. You wouldn't expect, if you split a data set into equals cat and equals not cat, you wouldn't expect it to be the case that you kind of, you'd have lost records in the process. So that can kind of trip people up. But the advantage of having nulls in there is basically that it makes data handling a lot easier in certain circumstances. For example, you can make SQL turn something to null if you would to avoid a divide by zero error or something like that. And that means that quite complicated code can run safely knowing that it's not going to fall over just because somebody puts in a weird result or something like that. So yeah, this is null. And you can see down here, it's a bit of a diagram about what null is. Crucially, although it is represented here as the word null, this is not actually text. It is trying to tell you that this cell is empty. And in fact, different SQL tools will show null differently. It is not actually a populated thing. It is a special value that is neither a cat nor not a cat. This is another way of saying not equals, by the way. Yeah, I could just as easily have picked this version, but they're equivalent to SQL. What null is it's null. And to check for that, you have to use the term is null. So if we come back up here, we can see here that the AI said animal type is null. And that's the most important thing. And in fact, I can get rid of this for the moment. That was, some people represent a lack of information by having a sort of empty string, but I wouldn't worry about that. There we go. These are the ones where the animal type is null. And in fact, actually, the number of them is 265. So if you did the maths on how many rows there were missing, you should find that that adds up. And yeah, the main thing to take away here is that if you're worried about nulls, you have to make sure that the code is specifically checking for them. And that involves asking the AI to look for cases where you do not know something, as opposed to where something is unknown, which is a very subtle difference, but it's about making sure that you're not asking the AI to check for an equality of some kind. So now let's try asking the AI to show us incidents where it wasn't a cat or we don't know what it was. So here, you can say, show me incidents in animal rescue instance CSV where animal type is not a cat or we don't know the animal type. Let's try seeing what SQL gives us from this. There we go. So what it's come out with is it's saying select star from animal rescue instance.csv, where the animal type is null. So that's correct. We know that it's got that bit right. And it said, or animal type does not equal cat. Now, actually, this is not right, annoyingly, because it's looked for cat with a capital letter. And this is a great example of the sort of thing you need to keep an eye out from with the AI. It doesn't, at the moment, have the context about what this information looks like. So it's made a guess here that our cat information is capitalized, and it's wrong. So I'm actually going to reject this and then say is not cat in quotes here, so that hopefully it'll get the gist that actually I'm trying to say specifically cat in lowercase, and it has. There we go. You can see it's formatted it differently as well, but that's fine. So this looks like it's actually going to work. There we go. And we've got some 6,188, which is more than we had before when we were looking at not cats. And that's because we've used the or operator. It's relatively straightforward for a human to think about, show me something where it's A or B. There is a bit of a little bit to understand in that when SQL operates or, it doesn't always mean it exactly the same way that a human means it. For SQL, if you have condition A or condition B, it will produce any instances where either of those conditions are true. So in this case, it's the condition could be show me anything where the top is purple or the top is green. But if there were another top that were both purple and green, that would also fulfill that criteria. That's possibly a bad example. I think this is the only... Basically, if it satisfies both condition A and condition B, the or is also true. And that's a slightly niche case that just is a little bit different when it comes to a common language. And the difference here is that if we go to the and operator, which we haven't done an example of, but I'm sure everybody understands the word and. If you have two conditions A and B, condition A and condition B is true only if both of those conditions are true. So or is true if either of the conditions are true, condition A or condition B. If any one of them is true, then it's true. Whereas and is true if condition A and condition B are both true. And if you had trouble with the code above, make sure that you're doing is not. Right, so moving on to aggregation. So far, we've only looked at data. It's time for us to start actually getting into running some calculations here. And this is something that the AI is going to be really good at. So why don't we ask it how many rows there are in the data? And this is a really, really easy thing to ask. Just pasted my query from above because I want to make sure I've got the table name right. But I'm going to say, how many rows are there in animal rescue incidents.csv? And it said, select count of star from animal rescue incidents.csv. It's got the name of the table right. Count star, as I've said here, simply tells us how many rows there are in the data. So that's exactly what we want. Let's run this. And it said that there are 13,072 rows, which is the number that we had earlier. I think it is. I wrote it down up here, didn't I? 13,072. So yes. So that was the count operator. So we know how many rows there are in the data. That's one thing. But actually, let's try and calculate something more specific. How many of them were incidents involving a dog? Well, there are lots of ways we could go about doing this in terms of the natural language we're going to use. But I'm just going to copy and paste my above query because I like to do that. And then I'm going to say, how many rows are there in animal rescue instance or CSV? And then I'm going to say where the animal type is dog. Now, admittedly, I've written SQL a lot, which is probably why I'm leaning towards using the SQL language of where the animal type is dog. And you'll see I'm also using the term rows, but there are other ways that you could describe this. You could say how many rows in animal rescue CSV are for an incident involving a dog. But if you don't give it the specific name of the field, it might struggle to get it. So I'm going to say have an animal type equal, say of dog. I'm not sure how well it's going to handle the equals. So how many rows in animal rescue instance.csv have an animal type of dog? It's from this, and it's going to say, oh, do the exact same thing as we did before. Select count star, that is, from animal rescue instance.csv, where animal type equals dog. That looks correct to me. I'm going to run that. And it said that there are 1,756. Something else you may have spotted, it's put a name in here. Last time I did this, it called it dog incident count, which seems very serious. But all it's doing here is saying, when we output this data, make sure to call this column dog count. Because remember, although SQL has its inputs are always data tables, its outputs are also data tables. And so when you use an alias, which is what we're doing here, you're giving a name to a column in the output table. So you're saying in the output, make sure that this column, the count star information, is in a column called dog count. So we know how many incidents involved a dog, but what if we wanted a full breakdown of incidents by animal type? Well, we're not going to run this for every animal type one by one. I mean, for one thing, we don't actually know what animal types are in the data set. We've just seen a couple of them. So there are probably a few that we don't know. But it's okay, because actually there's a much quicker way of getting there rather than running every single one. So the next step is ask the AI to get a count of incidents by animal type. Admittedly, the way that I've worded that question is pretty much how I'd recommend doing it. So I'm going to say, get me a count of incidents from animal rescue incidents.csv by animal type. And I recommend if you put animal type in quotes and with an underscore, it's gonna hopefully tell it this is exactly how we should be labeling this thing. So what it's done now is it said select animal type and count of star from animal rescue incidents and group by animal type. So this group by animal type clause establishes that we want to separate the whole table up by animal type. And you can see that animal type shows up both here and down here. It's a bit weird that you have to say the thing that you're grouping by in the query and also tell it that you're grouping by that. But that's because, again, the SQL output is a table. So you're describing what the table is going to look like as well as how you're going to get there, basically. And this has gotten us a group by animal type. And look, there's loads of animal types that we'd never have spotted if we were doing this bit by bit. There's exactly one incident since 2009 involving a bull. I don't know what a bull was doing in central London, but there you go. And there's all sorts of other quite rare ones. And then we can also see that there's quite a few cats in here, as we discussed earlier. So this is what's called an aggregation, because we aren't showing a subset of the data. We're actually showing what happens when we mash a bunch of the data together, when we group it up by something, which in this case was animal type. So yeah, it groups it up by animal type, and then it ran this count of star over every segment, and then told us how many rows there were. If yours did not work, you may want to check that the animal type field is referenced correctly in both places. That's usually the problem with group bys. Although, to be honest, SQL's AI is very good at writing that bit of the SQL. If it's got one of them wrong, it's probably got both of them. So we can also aggregate by more than one field at once, which is very helpful in cases where, we have more than one question to ask at once, or where we're trying to get a bit more of a deep dive into the data set. So next up, we're going to count combinations of location type and rescue type. Actually, just going to grab my earlier text, because again, I'll do that. So get me a count of incidents from animal rescue incidents.csv, and this time I'm going to say by location type and rescue type. And again, just putting quotes around things seems to help the AI know, I mean this specific field name, don't mess around with it, please. You could also say, please count combinations of location type and rescue type in animal rescue instance.csv. There are other ways you could describe this. Let's run this. So what we've got is very similar to the above. So up here we had a select something with a count star and then group by that something. Well, here we've got select two things with a count star and then group by those two things. So this is going to show us every combination of location type and rescue type in the table, and also how many times that combination occurred. At least it is if it's going to run the SQL. Aha. It has just reloaded the data set. It's like, sorry, reloaded the workbook even. And it's forgotten the SQL that we were asking. Right, that's fine. Oh, well, it actually ran it, but let me just grab it. Oh, no, I can't do it. Right. A count of rows in what's called SQL instance.csv. By location type and rescue type. There we go, same exact thing. I don't know why Data Lab decided to have a little moment there. So here we've got a breakdown of every single one of them. There's quite a few combinations. There are 25 of them. There we go. Some of them are quite common. Animals rescued from a height at a dwelling. Other animal assistants at a dwelling. Some of them are quite rare. Animals rescued from water in a boat. Other animal assistants on a boat. I think it sounds like boat rescues are quite rare as a rule. But you may notice that this data is not sorted in any way. So when we look at this, we go, well, actually the animals rescued from a height and other animal assistants, both in dwellings, those are two of the biggest ones, and yet they're not at the top. And that's because we haven't asked it to sort anything. SQL's not going to sort things unless we ask it to. So coming down to the next one, let's try and get the AI to sort it. So let's grab this previous statement we made. But actually, let's just make sure we got the name of the table correctly. So we want to have a count of rows by animal type sorted by the number of incidents. And this is actually the sort of question that I ask literally 100 times a day. So get me a count of rows in animal rescue incidents.csv by animal type, sorted by the number of rows. Let's try this. Don't know if it's going to work perfectly, but let's have a go. So what it said is get us animal type count star as incident count. Great, that's much the same as what we saw earlier. And it's got this extra statement at the end called order by. So order by says order the output, and SQL isn't going to order the output unless you tell it to. The AI has also added desc here, which basically means make it go from larger to smaller. If you don't do that, it will go from smaller to larger. There are reasons why you might want either one. If you're trying to, if you've got an index marked 1, 2, 3, 4, obviously you sometimes want to mark things to order that. Alphabetizing things is normally from small to larger, i.e. A to Z. But in this case, we're trying to go with incidents. We want the most popular things to happen first, and that's cats. So this has worked fine. And actually, this is the kind of thing that the AI is quite good at. You can see that we're using quite a lot of different SQL clauses here, and the AI is just kind of getting it done. So let's go to the next kind of logical extreme of this, which is to say, well, what are the top 5 animal types? And this is something that a human, again, is going to be very, very good at asking. That we as a human can ask in a very short sentence, but actually involves some quite complicated SQL. So show me the top 5 animal type in animal rescue instance.csv by number of instances. Hopefully it's going to pick up on this. So I didn't pluralize it. I said top 5 animal type, which is not great English, but it's because I was trying to make it very clear that that's what the field is supposed to be called. That's a relatively short piece of text, and it's given us quite a complicated little SQL block. Let's try running it. And it's worked. And we've got the top 5 most popular types of rescue, or types of incident. And what it's done is it's used the limit statement that we saw at the very beginning, where we say get us only 5 rows. Well, it turns out that limit is only applied after it's already gotten the other data. So it's just going to get us basically, it's giving us a top 5 list, which is very helpful. And yeah, down here I wrote up everything the AI should have used. So it's used select and from, it's used count of star and group by, and it's also used order by and desk and limit in order to limit the ultimate data. So yeah, really quite neat. And as always, if you're having problems, you should be checking that the table name is correct. You should check that the field names are correct. Oh, and also you may spot this. It's ordered by the number of instances. And that's because the alias is what you end up, because it orders by after it's done everything else, you actually have to use the alias for the field. Anyway. So that's it in terms of actual direct coding we're going to do. And we're coming close to the end of the webinar. But I just wanted to quickly let you know about some of the other things that AI can do. And like I was saying at the beginning, actually, this is more likely what I'm going to do. I tend to use AI for assistance when I'm trying to fix something or when I'm working on a larger piece of code rather than when I'm just doing a quick select statement. So in this case, this piece of code does not work. And I can tell you it doesn't work because when I run it, it's going to say error. But it looks fine, right? I mean, at a glance, you could totally expect that to work. But famously, SQL gives the most appalling error statements. It is really not clear what's gone wrong here. It does say that there's a problem at count star, but it says syntax error. Yeah, it's really not giving us enough information here. But what the AI is really good at doing is just fixing this. So if you just click fix and explain, the AI will take a look at this and it'll say, oh, here are a couple of things that are wrong. So first off, there's a comma missing between animal type and count star. Secondly, the order by was actually wrong because the desk was written before incident count instead of after it. And also the group by statement needs to happen before the order by statement. And once we've made all of those changes, it should give us code that selects the top 5 animal types with the most incidents. So the AI is betting that this is going to work and telling us that that's what it does. And there we go, it works. Now, this is the kind of thing that AI is really, really good at. As a human, it can be quite hard to go, oh, have I got my group by statement in the wrong order? Or, oh, have I not referenced the field that I'm using later? You know, these sorts of things can be quite hard to spot. AI is very good at fixing things that aren't working, or at just explaining what's happening. So again, if I, so we've got the code to run with AI assistance, we can ask it to add an explanation to the bottom of the code. So let's say, please add an explanation to the bottom of this code. I don't know why I felt the need to say the word please. I'm worried sometimes that I'm going to become an impolite person if I don't say please to AI. Does that make me crazy? So it's added an explanation. It says this query selects the top 5 animal types with the highest number of rescue incidents. It reads data from the animal rescue incident CSV file. It groups by animal type. So you see, the AI is very good at saying this is what's happening. And this is also something that I use a lot. When you have to pick up somebody else's SQL that they wrote 3 years ago and they can't remember what it does, sometimes the quickest thing to do is to just say to the AI, hey, what does this do? And it's very good at spotting the kind of intricacies of what's going on. And that's it. So there's a final challenge here in terms of bringing it all together. But to be honest, I'm going to leave that as an exercise for people to finish afterwards, because we've only got a couple of minutes left. And so, yeah, if there are any questions, I think now is probably the time to.
Perfect. Cool. Thank you so much, John. Yeah, that was brilliant. And yeah, I think we've fixed the data lab problem, which is nice. But yeah, we've got a couple minutes left for questions. So if you have any last minute questions, everyone, please let us know in the chat. I am going to go through a couple that we've got from people already throughout the session. So not a question, but something that I thought was interesting that Victor put in the chat, which was, I think this was a while back, but he said using the PSB framework is a good way of looking at data problem, solution, benefit. Is that something that rings true for you, John?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are lots of different ways of, or lots of different sort of approaches to looking at data. But yes, like the understanding the problem, knowing what solution you want, and knowing the benefit to it are all very, very helpful things. Something that we as analysts struggle with on a day-to-day basis is that so many people come to us with problems. And even if we could solve them all, that wouldn't necessarily mean that it would benefit everyone. You know, saying what is the actual benefit to us doing this analysis? is a very important part of it. Because ultimately, if you work for a company, your goal is to make that company successful, and that is the benefit you're trying to achieve. And it's very easy as a data person, as a data professional, to get lost in the data is really fun and interesting, but that's not necessarily useful. You need to ultimately achieve a benefit, so specify the problem, identify the solution, but also, is there a benefit to doing that?
Yeah, I think that's advice that carries across many different facets of life as well. Cool. So we had a question from Tom saying, do the prompts that you put in a notebook carry over to another session? Yeah, I'll let you answer this.
Annoyingly, no. As I found out while preparing this webinar, if you're doing your prompts using something like ChatGPT, obviously that'll save them all. DataLab doesn't expect you to save your prompts, and it kind of wipes them as you go along. To be honest, you'll find that it's different for every different version of what you're doing. When I'm doing coding in VS Code and that kind of thing, I don't even have prompts anyway. It's just a sort of autofill. So yeah, you kind of get used to every different environment does it slightly differently. But as a rule, DataLab doesn't save prompts, which is quite frustrating. There are other AI features, like there's an AI chat feature that you can use to ask it questions about the data, and I think those are better at saving stuff. But yeah, the prompts that we put in SQL cells here aren't saved.
Got it. We do also have, for everyone that is accessing the notebook, we do have a solution notebook in the files pane on the right-hand side. I don't think it'll be in your... Oh, no, it is in yours, John. But yeah, you can check that out for all of the prompts that we put together in today's session.
Yep.
Cool.
And the other thing to check there, sorry, was just that this Introduction to SQL with AI.pdf is the cheat sheet from the course that goes alongside this session.
Yes, well put. Okay, I think we've got time for one more question, just so we don't run over for too long. Another question from Tom, actually. So Tom says, does this way with AI hinder rather than help the training of the brain to convert natural language into SQL? So yeah, when you're doing AI assisted prompting, are you harming your experience when it comes to learning SQL, or yeah?
So it's a good question, and definitely something to be, to think about. Is this making me better, or is it a crutch? It's hard for me to answer that from my personal experience, because for the most part, I already know what I'm going to code. And if I'm getting AI to help me with that, it's because I'm going to do something really dull that involves a lot of typing, and the AI is going to make that quicker, not because it's going to change what the output's going to be. But I do know that a lot of my colleagues write SQL with AI, and I can say that they are significantly more effective than they previously were in terms of, I don't know if it's necessarily because it gives them the confidence, or if it is because they are teaching them about it. My experience is that it is beneficial, and that, the real fear, and genuinely, this is something that I was very worried about at the start, was that we were going to basically say to everyone, right, you're all data professionals now, go make it up, and that they were all going to come out with a load of really rubbish results. And actually, I have many colleagues who would not have touched SQL with a barge pole, who come to me and say, hey, I'm having a problem with this workbook. And actually, they've written some really amazing stuff, and really the problem is completely unrelated to the AI and SQL. It's actually to do something very specific about the data rather than anything else. So for the most part, I would say, coding AI with SQL, I know it feels like a crutch, but it is actually just better. A little bit like saying being able to Google what other people have written online. Is that helpful? Well, yes, it really is.
Yeah, fair enough. Cool. I think that's it for questions that we can cover for today. I did just want to give a quick shout out to the SQL to Rookie to Rockstar campaign that we've got running at the moment. So yeah, this is, I'll put a link to this in the chat so you can head over. But yeah, today's session was part one of the sessions that we're running this week. So this week is SQL Rookie to Rockstar week. Tomorrow we've got AI assisted SQL joins. So it's going to be very similar in terms of us working in DataLab again, hopefully with less operational issues, and yeah, with a little bit less freezing. But yeah, please do join us same time again tomorrow. We're going to be back here on YouTube and LinkedIn streaming, and we'll be doing something very similar, AI assisted SQL joins. And then on Thursday we have a panel chat with Mo Chen, who's actually a guest on DataFramed last year. That was the most listened to episode that we've had on DataFramed, the podcast that Richie usually hosts. And yeah, two more people, Dave, who is also a DataCamp webinars regular. So yeah, please do come back for that. We're going to be covering how to get hired in analytics, and also check out the cheat sheets that we've got available. So we've got our SQL with AI cheat sheet, the SQL joins cheat sheet, and then the window functions cheat sheet as well. And we also have all of our future curriculum as well as the AI native experience as well. So please do check those out in the meantime. But yeah, we'll see you again tomorrow, everyone. Thank you so much, John, for walking us through it today. And yeah, please do come back tomorrow.